There is a plant growing wild across Europe and North America right now that created the world's most prescribed diabetes drug. 150 million prescriptions per year, $2.5 billion in annual sales. Medieval physicians used it to treat the plague. French farmers fed it to goats to increase milk production. In 1950, a scientist isolated its active compound and synthesized the drug that would save millions of lives. Then the pharmaceutical industry classified the original plant as a noxious weed and made it illegal to cultivate in most states. Not because it stopped working, because you cannot patent a plant that has been growing wild for 800 years. The diabetes industry does not want you to know that metformin came from something they now call a roadside pest. The plant is called Galega officinalis. In English, goat's rue. It grows 3 to 5 feet tall with clusters of white or purple flowers. The name comes from medieval Europe, where farmers noticed goats eating this plant produced more milk. By the 1300s, European herbalists were using it for something else. People with constant thirst, frequent urination, and wasting disease. We call it diabetes now. They called it the wasting sickness. And goat's rue helped. In 1536, French herbalist Jean Rouelle documented goat's rue in his medical texts as a treatment for excessive urination. He did not know why it worked, he just knew it did. For 300 years, it remained a folk remedy, passed between herbalists and rural doctors. Then in 1918, scientists finally figured out what was inside. A team of researchers isolated a compound called guanidine from goat's rue leaves. When they tested it on rabbits, blood sugar dropped dramatically. They had found the active ingredient. By 1922, pharmaceutical companies were testing synthetic guanidine derivatives as diabetes treatments. The results were promising. Blood sugar control improved, patients felt better, then people started dying. The synthetic guanidines caused severe liver damage. The trials stopped. The research was abandoned. But they had proven one thing. Something in goat's rue could control blood sugar. In 1950, a French physician named Jean Stern was reviewing the abandoned guanidine research. He saw the problem. The synthetic versions were too toxic. But what if you modified the structure slightly? What if you could keep the blood sugar effect and eliminate the liver damage? He synthesized a new compound, dimethylbiguanide, a close chemical cousin to the guanidines in goat's rue, but with a different molecular arrangement. He tested it. It worked. Blood sugar dropped, no liver toxicity. He called it Glucophage, the glucose eater. In 1957, Glucophage launched in France. Doctors prescribed it. Patients improved. It was safe, effective, and cheap to produce. By the 1960s, it was used across Europe, but not in the United States. The FDA did not approve it. For 38 years, Americans could not access the drug. Why? Because you cannot patent dimethylbiguanide. The molecule was too old. Stern had published the structure in 1950. By the time American pharmaceutical companies wanted to sell it in the US, the patent window had closed. Any company could manufacture it. There was no exclusivity, no market protection. American pharmaceutical companies were not interested in a drug anyone could make. They were developing patentable alternatives. Insulin analogues, sulfonylureas, drugs they could protect and profit from. Meanwhile, metformin, the generic name for dimethylbiguanide, became the standard treatment across Europe. It was working. Millions of people were using it. The data was undeniable. And still, the FDA waited. It was not until 1995 that the FDA finally approved metformin for use in the United States. 38 years after France. Decades after the evidence was clear. The delay was not scientific. It was economic. Today, metformin is the most prescribed drug for type 2 diabetes in the world. Over 150 million prescriptions per year in the United States alone. The global diabetes drug market is worth $60 billion annually. Metformin is the foundation, and it came directly from the chemical structure of a plant that grew wild in European fields for centuries. But here is what happened to that plant. Goat's rue is now classified as a noxious weed in multiple US states. In Colorado, Montana, and several others, it is illegal to cultivate. The USDA lists it as an invasive species. Agricultural Extension Offices publish eradication guides. The same plant that gave us metformin is treated as a pest that must be destroyed. Why? Because goat's rue still works. The whole plant still contains guanidine compounds. The leaves still lower blood sugar. And if people knew they could grow the original source in their backyard, they might ask why they need a prescription for the synthetic version. You cannot patent a plant, you cannot control it, you cannot charge $50 a month for something that grows wild along roadsides. So, what did the pharmaceutical industry do? They took the active compound, modified it slightly, synthesized it in a lab, and patented the process. Not the molecule. You cannot patent dimethylbiguanide, but you can patent the manufacturing method. You can patent extended release formulations. You can patent combination drugs that mix metformin with other compounds. The industry built a $60 billion market on a molecule they reverse engineered from a medieval folk remedy. And then they made sure nobody remembered where it came from. There has not been a single modern clinical trial on whole goat's rue plant, not one. All the research focuses on synthetic derivatives, drugs that can be patented, drugs that can be controlled. The plant that started it all is ignored. Worse than ignored, criminalized. In most countries, you cannot legally sell goat's rue for human consumption. It is classified as a potentially toxic plant, even though humans have been using it safely for 700 years. The irony is metformin itself is not risk-free. It causes gastrointestinal side effects in 30% of users. Some people develop vitamin B12 deficiency. In rare cases, it causes lactic acidosis, but it is legal, prescribed, and profitable. The plant it came from? Illegal to grow in multiple states. Here is what the industry will not tell you. Metformin was not invented, it was discovered inside a plant. Scientists did not create a new molecule from scratch. They looked at what nature had already designed, copied the structure, and made a synthetic version they could control. This is not unique to metformin. Aspirin came from willow bark, digoxin came from foxglove, paclitaxel came from Pacific yew trees. The pharmaceutical industry has built billions extracting compounds from plants, synthesizing them and patenting the derivatives while the original sources are forgotten or banned. Type 2 diabetes affects 537 million adults worldwide. The numbers are climbing. The pharmaceutical industry sells the solution as a modern scientific achievement. They do not mention it came from a plant medieval goat farmers knew increased milk production. They do not mention French herbalists in the 1500s were already using it for diabetes symptoms. They do not mention the decades-long delay in FDA approval because the drug could not be protected by patent. The plant is still here. Goat's rue still grows wild across North America and Europe. It still contains the same guanidine compounds. But in most places, you cannot legally grow it, harvest it, or use it. You can only buy the synthetic version from a pharmacy with a prescription at $50 per month for a molecule that came from a roadside weed. If you search for goat's rue today, you will find warnings, potentially toxic, invasive species, noxious weed. Contact your agricultural extension office for removal instructions. You will not find information about its history as a diabetes treatment. You will not find studies on the whole plant. You will find eradication guides. This is how the pharmaceutical industry works. Find a plant that heals, isolate the active compound, synthesize a patentable version, profit from it for decades, then classify the original plant as dangerous and bury the history. The cure becomes a commodity. The source becomes a crime. The diabetes industry does not want you to know that the drug saving millions of lives came from a plant they now pay you to destroy. The pharmaceutical companies do not want you to know that metformin was not invented in a lab. It was copied from nature. And the regulatory agencies do not want you to ask why the plant is illegal, but the synthetic copy is essential medicine. It is called goat's rue. It has been treating diabetes since the 1300s. The pharmaceutical industry used it to create a $60 billion market, and they classified it as a weed, so you would never know where your medicine really came from. If this opened your eyes, hit subscribe and share this before the algorithm buries it. The knowledge they are erasing needs to be preserved. The next story drops soon.